a really good conversation to have with the technical committee as well. So, Sharice, whenever you're available to bring up that PowerPoint, we can just sort of go through that really quickly. One of the questions, and David, you can jump in. I don't know if Tim is on here as well, but David, you can jump in if you want to provide additional information, or if I misspeak a little bit based on the conversation that we've been having with Emily. But one of the things, and it was really helpful, just defining the purpose of these webinars. And my understanding and my feeling is that we think we have the vision statement and the guiding principles in pretty good shape. And based on the public feedback we've been getting from the survey, that seems to be the case with the public. But the public webinars will be an opportunity to confirm that, or to let us know if there's something we need to go back and change. But hopefully those are in good shape and the public will confirm that. But as far as getting public input on the vision statement and the guiding principles, we're hoping to keep that pretty high level and not have to do a lot to revise those other than what we've already discussed. So does that track with what you all were thinking as far as the vision statement and guiding principles?
Yeah, I think that based on the conversations emails we've been having, that sounds consistent.
Yeah, okay.
And I think the emphasis of these meetings was to get the property owners and businesses nearby kind of input on these.
Right. Yeah, so we'll do polls, just to really simple polls for both the vision statement and the guiding principles. Do you agree or disagree? If there's a large amount of people who say that they disagree, then we'll have a conversation about it. Hopefully this will confirm what we already suspect, that the public is you know, that this already reflects what the public wants out of the process. I mean, that's what we've tried to do when we put those together. So hopefully we got it right. If we didn't, we'll have those conversations, but hopefully we won't have to spend a lot of the webinars discussing that in further detail. But I am prepared to have a discussion with the public if needed on those. So then the bulk of the conversation is going to be based on those 3 questions. Can you scroll down, Sharice? It is slide number 12. Will be based on those questions that we posed to the in the mailer that was sent out. I did receive one email from someone who had received the mailer, so we know that they were received. We really don't have a way to gauge, because we did not ask people to sign up ahead of time, how many people or what the interest level is for these public webinars. So we're kind of just gonna see what happens. But our hope is that we'll have a good conversation. Just Sharice is gonna moderate that with people raising their hands and you know, typing in the chat box, and to moderate that. My goal is mostly to get feedback versus us responding. It's more for us to listen, to hear what people say. If there are specific questions, we'll answer it though. But I also put up our email addresses and our website, so that if somebody didn't want to necessarily respond publicly in the webinar, they would still have other ways to provide their thoughts or feedback. Is that in line as well? With what you all were hoping to get out of, or the information or the feedback you all were hoping to get out of these?
It is for me.
Yeah.
That works for me. Yeah.
Okay, cool. We'll see. We had really good success doing something pretty similar with Smart Scale, which is a much different process, but we didn't want to overly complicate things too much, and you know, let the conversation you know, guide itself in the direction that it would guide. So yeah, we'll see what happens and roll with it. Hopefully we'll have some good conversations. Um,
And maybe just along the lines of what Emily is kind of trying to get a handle on, these discussions sort of help feed finalizing the plan in a way, correct? It sort of asks
Right.
these questions, what, you know, you agree with the vision, you agree with the, I always forget what we call them. I keep calling them guiding
Guiding
principles.
principles.
Yeah, guiding principles. And these are sort of, again, the opportunity for them to weigh in on these sort of questions that might help us finalize recommendations and plan maps and such for phase 2.
Right. So while we might get specific recommendations out of these, I'm also just really interested to hear, hearing some of the things that we're talking about, as somebody who owns property that they might want to use for a commercial purpose or something like that. Do you have concerns that you want to, voice about that? Like, is there something that we're not considering that we should, or
Right. Not get specific recommendations from
right.
them, but their comments might lead to us massaging and changing or adjusting certain things.
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, if we get specific suggestions for recommendations, that's great too. I'm hoping more just to make sure that we have these perspectives as we're drafting everything. Cool. All right, and then Jessica is just going to give. Yeah, you can go to the next slide, Cherise. Jessica is just going to give a really, really brief overview. We're not really going to spend a lot of time talking about the feasibility study because there is another workshop. So she's going to give a really high level overview of what that feasibility study is. And then we're mostly just going to promote that if this is something you're interested in learning more about and want to have some additional opportunities to provide comment, but there's going to be an opportunity to do that on November 12th. I know, Albemarle, I know you all have expressed some desires and concerns as far as the messaging of that. Jessica, are you available to provide any sort of context or feedback at this point?
I'm here. So I initially got feedback from Albemarle County and City of Charlottesville staff at our bicycle and pedestrian coordination meeting last week, but it sounds like some of the info I've gotten from you, Sandy, recently is a little bit different. So my goal is going to be, if you go to the next slide, Cherise. So I had a tentative agenda that looked like this, but I will put together those slides in the next week or so, and then bring them to Sandy to share with those of you who've expressed some concerns, and we can work out details from there.
Yeah, one of our, sorry for babbling. Emily, I don't know how much she's talked with you, Sandy, about our concerns with this. But maybe you can you guys can answer some questions for us. We're not sure to what extent State Farm is aware of the results of the study. And I guess our concern was questions as specific as what is the preferred location when we haven't had a chance to engage with them yet. But if they are aware of the study and the results of the feasibility study, that might change how we perceive the depth of what we do these coming weeks. So do you know if they're aware or have been contacted about the results of the VDOT study?
So I can say that I have not reached out to them, VDOT has not reached out to them, and VDOT's consultants have not reached out to them. So yeah. I think that would, I agree with you that it would be good to talk to them before this goes any farther.
Yeah, just so that they understand this is really a feasibility. We're not recommending budgeting for it yet. This is really a sort of a, can it work? And if we want to do it, here's where it costs. And here are some good locations that have been, they're true. It's true information. It's not guesswork or based on multipliers, but it isn't a project that's ready to go to bid or something like that.
Or who would be the right person for me to connect with to start moving that conversation along?
Well, I think that's why wasn't sure. I was hoping Emily would be here. Right? They were one of the enhanced contacts we were going to make, and our economic development offices and Emily's office is working on making that contact. And to talk about this and some other things, just an opportunity to sit down with them about several things. And I think we'd want to do that before November 12th. But I think it's okay to mention it here. It's just how much, I think at one time we thought this would be a little more in-depth feedback on that study. And I think we may want to kind of forego that more in-depth discussion to the November 12th meeting when we have time to kind of sit down with State Farm and make sure they understand the context of it all.
So David, would it make you more comfortable if we removed slide 13 from the presentation, where I could just really briefly talk about how the agenda that we're going to go over, rather than showing any locations at that time?
Yeah, I think what we talked about, and I'm sorry, I've sort of let this go a little bit with Emily and EDO this week. What we had sort of talked about was if you wanted to ask questions and start the conversation here, it would be more of, instead of your preferred location, what are the things that you think are good and bad about a location across, since this is really about the Greenway plan or the corridor plan, what are the issues that relate to the corridor from the bridge that you might have, or what are the things that you like about one over the other as opposed to just picking one or the other? Because picking one or the other sounds like we're choosing one to go to bid on, as opposed to what are the things you like and don't like about those options. But it may be just to keep it at a very high level to say it's going on. We want to make you aware of it. The plan acknowledges the possibility. That's been a long time community interest, but we have another process on the way. We're more informing you of that so you can come attend that meeting and discuss it. I think that's the way I think we'd prefer to do it. And I can confirm that with Emily.
So yeah, I would definitely appreciate some confirmation, but what it sounds like to me is that for the upcoming meetings on the 24th and on the weeknight on the following week, you're just looking for, you're okay with mentioning that there was a feasibility study and that we are going to, just mentioning it in very broad terms and speaking about encouraging people to come to the November 12th meeting. And at the November 12th meeting, you would be comfortable with us going into greater detail about the options. At that point, are you still suggesting on November 12th that we ask people for pros and cons for each location and not ask people for a preferred location?
That's what I want. I'm deferring to Emily on that. I think the first issue for us is just timing, that we have a public process where we're asking kind of detailed questions, and we haven't made State Farm even aware of the study yet. So the November 12th meeting gives us more time to make that contact, let them know and understand what the study's all about, what it is. So I think we may be fine. I've kind of, like I said, I've deferred a little bit to Emily on this. It seems like VDOT's adamant about some specific information about the one alternative or the other. So we have to balance, I think we have to balance the expectations of the people that paid for the work. And we'll have to step through that here shortly. And I don't think I have a consensus feeling or opinion yet, or direction, because I'm kind of working through CAPE with that. And don't really have that yet. But I think for this meeting coming up Saturday, and probably the one for the 29th, it would be, as we have talked about, something that's very high level and a little less focused in on the bridge itself. And if there are any questions, it's more about how the bridge might relate to the Greenway.
Sure.
But I'll try to get that wrapped up today and check in. I'm sorry, I thought one of them was going to be here, or I would have checked beforehand on what the status of that is.
No, that.
And should we, I guess we should talk with you directly, right? So you can get your slide changed.
Yeah, if you want to have Emily or if you want to reach out to me, do you have my contact info?
Probably.
Okay, great. Otherwise, yeah, you can follow up with
Maybe,
Sharice or Sandy.
yeah, yeah.
I'm happy to pass along anything that needs to be passed along.
Yeah. Well, I want to keep you and Sharice aware too, so you know what's going on.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And maybe one suggestion would be on this particular slide to put maybe under the public feedback part, something very explicitly says, if this project moves forward. So it's kind of clear that it's an if the project moves forward, not this is happening kind of thing.
Mhm.
That might be some language to use to get people to realize this is, it's really just a feasibility thing. And that kind of might take off any alarms in their head that this is a done deal or anything like that. So that might be something to put on the slide or to use.
Right. Yeah,
If
good point.
Go to the next
Yeah.
step, which we haven't agreed to do yet. I mean, I hope we do, but.
Yeah, one aspect of it is making State Farm aware. The other aspect is some concern that this might be perceived as something like the trail on Route 20 through the median at the interchange. It kind of had some problems with it from public
Mhm.
understanding standpoint. And this is a different project than that because we're not trying to get money for it. We're just trying to figure out feasibility. But there could be a misunderstanding in the types of questions we ask. So again, emphasizing feasibility, whether it's doable, real costs in a real location, so we know real impacts, but really it's a feasibility study. I think that's the important thing to make sure that people understand. And I think the slide does that.
So we will, so there are two rounds of follow-up. It sounds like we need, first of all, is just to get clarification on if there are any revisions that need to be made to these slides for this first set of public webinars. And then the second one will be for prior to the November 12th
That's right.
discussion. So that's just something that I guess we'll need to follow up with. I mean, Jessica and, us as well. We'll just need to follow up on you with you all, or you all will need to keep us, informed of where those discussions are as we're preparing for that.
Yeah.
Just so we know. So then, and also our hope is that we'll be happy to answer any questions that people have very generally. Otherwise, we're mostly just going to be promoting, hey, there's another opportunity for this on November 12th. That's when we'll go into more detail on this. And then, of course, we'll post the recordings of both sets of webinars on the website for anybody that's not available to attend them. We'll make sure that that the feasibility study workshop information is on the website prior to this first round of the corridor plan webinar, just so that when we direct people to the website, that information is there. But I don't know if there's any other public outreach or notification we need to be doing for that. Go all. Well, or maybe we just need to be communicating with keeping your public information offices in the loop. Chris, do you know, I don't know if sorry, I can't see to know if there's anybody else in the county. Do you know if your public information office people, your communications people want to be involved or are helping with this, or would that be beneficial to the city?
I've been taking lead just on the crossing study piece, the later meeting. And I did send over to the communications office and the people that put it on web calendars at that level.
Okay.
And I mentioned that we may have a press release coming in, in a week or so once we figure that out. But I'm not actually clear as much on the corridor study thing. I'm kind of letting neighborhood development lead from the city's end on that particular project because that's got a lot more to do with zoning and development and things like that. So is Missy or
It's Joey.
Joey or anybody on the line and maybe can answer for the corridor study outreach? I'm not sure exactly what we've done there. I know we've got that mailing list, but that's about all I'm aware of.
Yeah, I don't know if we need to do a lot more for that because we did send out the mailers for that one. So I feel like there's good I mean, whether or not somebody reads them, I can't, make them do that. But they've at least been contacted.
Yeah, sorry guys, I was trying to check some emails when you were asking the question. So see if I'd gotten anything. I think Emily was going to be contacting the city's office just to
Okay.
check in to see if there was any need for any greater continuity or anything. I
Okay.
think both for this and I think for the corridor stuff, I think that's a little more secondary now. I think they're kind of okay with understanding the process now, but I
Yeah.
think they were going to be checking in on with the city communications folks on the bridge, I think.
Great.
And I'll confirm that too.
Okay. Great.
Yeah.
Cool. So then we'll do that really high level, and then we'll just remind people, how else they can participate. They can, go to our website. They can email us comments. They can attend the webinar. We'll have that last slide if you just want to click on it, Cherise. It will have our email addresses on it. Yeah. And so then one question we did have was, does it make sense how long should we continue after these webinars to continue to get feedback from the public? We kind of had just put the deadline of November 30th because it's the end of the month. Do you think it makes sense to leave it open for that long? Is that too long? So we can start pulling that information to draft recommendations. I think we can start that process regardless of if there's still feedback coming in, but I just wanted to see if you guys had an understanding or an expectation for this that we haven't really talked about at this point.
You may maybe say something like, please try to get comments in by X date so we can, begin to do whatever, but then kind of leave it as, we'll take comments after that date, but we would appreciate it if you can get them in by a certain time, just to keep the thing going. That way it's not a hard deadline, but it allows you to keep moving to the next step.
A soft deadline. I'm looking at the calendar and I just realized that, if you try to go halfway through the month, November 13th is also a Friday. So maybe we want to not.
Yeah, I kind of agree with Friday the 13th. Yeah. I kind of agree with Chris. You could sort of encourage, best opportunity for get your comments. We strongly suggest you get our comments in by a certain date or something like that, but otherwise leave it open.
Okay.
I think that hopefully that will probably start to trail off after 2 or 3 weeks after the meeting anyway.
I would think so. Maybe a little bit of a resurgence after the feasibility study workshop.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But
that's true. Yeah, and since that's the 12th, it might. I think the end of the month sort of made sense, but you could encourage it to be a little bit sooner.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll leave it as it is for then, and just ask people nicely that we would love to hear from them earlier rather than later.
Yeah.
And then the other conversation that we were having back and forth with the county this morning that I wanted to hear you guys' thought on is obviously after this set of webinars, we're going to start actually, drafting recommendations and putting those together. One question I had is whether we, at that point, just go ahead and draft the entire plan, including recommendations, and just get that together. And at that point, there would be an opportunity to get public feedback on the plan in its entirety, or if it would make sense to do another round of public engagement to get feedback on the draft recommendations before letting the public see the plan in its entirety.
Well, I'm a little concerned about timing and getting the project complete. I mean, I know we want to make sure it's done the right way. I'm open to other people's thoughts, but I think we've gotten a lot of comment over time leading up through this process and the vision and guiding principles. It almost seems like we could draft a plan for just general feedback.
Okay.
And then depending on that feedback, it seems like we could hit a December timeframe, maybe January, which would keep us pretty close to schedule. I will say one of the things I've been thinking about is since there's sort of a thought that there may be a phase 3, which goes into greater detail. But I think the city and the county and the GHPDC need to decide whether we are going to do a phase 3. Because if we don't do a phase 3, then we may want to take a little bit more time on phase 2 and have a little bit more to it. And that sort of could play into what this end product is. But based on what we're supposed to be doing in the scope of work, it seemed to me that we could go with just a public process on a final draft document.
Okay.
But that's just my opinion.
Yeah, phase 3 was more of a Nick, you might have to jump in here. It was more of like a master plan type work. So at that point, I don't know that the PDC would, of course we'd want to be involved, but that would probably also require like an engineering or landscape architecture for, somebody who does that kind of work as the vision. Do you want to?
Yeah, that's correct, Sandy. I think when Will wrote the scope, the intent was that, in a possible phase 3, there would be a much more of like a consultant effort there with, landscape architectures to do that kind of master planning effort. But if we need to go back and look at some of those things, like you're saying, David, if that's not being teed up for a possible phase 3, maybe there is some of those elements that we could pull in into this phase, but just knowing that there's certain limitations, obviously, with our staff expertise, since none of us are have the capability to do some of those more master plan type stuff. But after this, we can take a look on kind of what some of those specifics would be in phase 3.
Yeah, I think it's more of just a question of checking in if we're not sure we're going to do a phase 3, which is a more, specific implementation plan almost, the way I sort of read it. Then is there anything else that this more comprehensive plan type document needs to say to guide the city and the county decision making? So I'm not suggesting we need to do anything, but it's probably worth putting an eye to that. Is there something, or is there more specificity about the restoration things that are shown on the plan, or what the trail design is going to be, so that the city and the county have some understanding of what we're trying to achieve with that level of specificity? And I'm not saying we do, it's just that might lead us to making some additional recommendations we hadn't thought we were going to make in phase 2. And we just need to decide whether that's important or not. But assuming, and that's the only thing that I was thinking might extend it more, and maybe that might cause another round of a little bit more detailed type input from the public. But short of that kind of change, I think we're probably ready to kind of get this thing, have people look at the plan in its totality in a public process.
Great. Are there any other thoughts on that? I think that's reasonable, and regardless, there will be a public opportunity to provide feedback on recommendations regardless. So
and maybe that presentation hones in on what the newer things are, the things that we didn't touch on quite as much, but you can kind of assume the vision guiding principles are pretty much set after this process, or at least had a fair amount of vetting.
Correct. Yeah. And so the other piece after these public engagement webinars, the other thing we were going to do was work on some of these more like one-on-one stakeholder group discussions. So David, I know we're having that discussion on Monday with, remind me of the name of the committee.
It's the Historic Preservation Committee.
The Historic
So
Preservation Committee.
yeah, I think what we're going to do is just touch base with them.
Mhm.
They've been invited to the 24th. If most of them show up, I think we probably would be a much less detailed presentation and more of just, do you have any comments today?
Yeah.
And otherwise, it's just to give them a quick overview of the project and encourage them to come to the 29th meeting.
Otherwise, we will also just, reach out to some of the other stakeholder groups that we've discussed and make sure, especially, some of the groups that were suggested by the staff from Albemarle and Charlottesville that works on the equity considerations. We'll utilize staff members that have relationships already for some of those groups, but mostly just to make sure that they're aware that if we make recommendations that impact any of those groups, that those perspectives are represented, and we want to know what potential concerns or implications would be, if we're all working to make sure that equity is a consideration as we develop the recommendations. We want to make sure that we know what those considerations need to be. So we'll do some of that outreach as well. And our team is happy to attend any other of these types of meetings that might make sense. Of course, our time frame is pretty crunched. We know that this is going to be a pretty, busy month or two to get everything in place, to get a draft, completed by the end of the year. But I think we're able to put the resources in to do that. But if you guys have any feedback or suggestions on ways that you think that should be conducted, we'd be happy to hear it. Otherwise, I think it's more just going to be a general presentation, maybe pared down a little bit from the public presentation, but asking these same questions or similar questions to a lot of these groups.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
I will say at least the ones I'm responsible for, our property owner contacts. I'm just not getting anybody answering my emails requesting meeting time. So we may go into the 24th with not many contacts to the people we wanted to have advanced contacts. The Pantop Shopping Center folks I've sent several emails to try to set up a meeting. But, I resent the mailer out to that contact. So at least, they had the letter with our offer. But to date, of the two that I'm responsible for contacting, I haven't gotten feedback from either one of them.
Well,
so hopefully you'll do better with the stakeholder groups.
I mean, all we can do is give them the opportunity, right? We can't
That's
force
right.
we can't force them to participate, but
That's
we need to
right.
make sure that they have the opportunity to.
That's
so.
right.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, I think that's actually all I had to go over on the agenda. I don't know, Sharif, are there any members of the public we should give an opportunity to make any statements or comments or ask questions? You're muted, Sharif.
I was just saying, no one has their hand raised. So if anybody would like to share any comments, this is your time.
Or anybody else on the committee, that covers everything that I was hoping to get through today. So we can end a little bit early, or if there's anything else you all want to talk about, we have some planned time at this point.
I'm good.
Great. All right. Going once, going twice. All right. Well, I guess we're gonna wrap up a little bit early then. Thanks everyone for sharing your
Thank you.
lunchtime with us again.
All righty. Thanks. Good
All
job.
right. Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.